Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX. We're down here at Chaparral Motorsports Day. Previously on Tech Tips, we've gone through air forks and some of the setup tips. Today we're going to go a little broader on suspension and talk about the clickers, what they do, when you should and when you shouldn't touch them. So today we're dealing with a modern day cartridge fork. This is what the majority of you will find on your motorcycles, and they're very simple. The compression is usually located up top and the rebound down below. They're easy to identify on the fork because it'll usually be a C or comp, which stands for compression, while the rebound side will have a T or 10, which actually means tension. The compression side of the fork is when the fork is compressing, when it is actually going through the down part of its stroke. That's what the compression adjuster is affecting. So if you turn it clockwise or in, it's closing down the valve and restricts oil flow, meaning it will go through the stroke slower. If you turn counterclockwise and open that adjuster, it will allow more oil flow, which will allow it to go through the stroke quicker. So now identifying when to turn the compression adjuster. This can be a little bit finicky because some people might think they're on the soft side when they're actually too stiff, and some people might think they're too stiff when they're actually on the soft side of things. One of the easiest ways to identify it if you're struggling is to have a rubber band or a zip tie on one of your fork legs so you can see how much travel you're using. Realistically, the majority of modern day full-size bike forks are around 12 inches of travel. Well, they're meant to be 12 inches for a reason, not to use 8, not to use 10. It's to try to utilize the maximum amount of that stroke. Even top pros will find that their systems bottom a couple times a lap depending upon their setup, if not very close to using up the whole stroke. So if you run something allows you to check the stroke length and you still have, say, 3 inches left to travel, you're probably too stiff. You could afford to go softer and use up more range of your suspension. So we've mentioned how to identify a little bit if the fork is too stiff. Now, another interesting thing is when the fork is so soft that it feels stiff. Some people run their settings so soft that you actually use up the stroke so quickly that you enter the bottoming area of the fork at too quick of a rate, and then the fork ramps up and gets harsh. A lot of things that'll happen for people in these situations, also under heavy braking, will be the bike feels twitchy because the bike becomes unbalanced because there's so much weight on the front end. As we just went through, there's a lot of causes and situations that can make the fork feel different ways, and sometimes it's really hard to identify whether you are too stiff or too soft. Honestly, when you're starting out, there's only really one way to accomplish this. You have to start adjusting the suspension and figure out what it does. A lot of people will get a little worried that they're going to mess up their stuff, so they'll only make 1 or 2 clicks here and there, and they really can't identify it. Even real seasoned test riders can't always feel the difference in 1 click. And what do we mean by a click? You hear people say 10, 12, 14. It's very universal in the suspension world that a click is talking about going all the way stiff. If you turn it clockwise far enough, the adjuster will eventually bottom out. Then when you start coming back counterclockwise, you'll feel a click. That is 1 click. Then 2 clicks, 3 clicks. Some adjusters work on quarter turns, some work on half turns, but either way, you're feeling that click when it settles into the groove. So if I'm talking about 10 clicks out and I want you to go to 12, you're going to be 10 clicks out counterclockwise from the start. So typically on most cartridge forks, you'll find the compression adjuster located in the center of the cap. Offset from that, you'll find an air bleed screw. When turned counterclockwise and unscrewed, it will release any built-up air pressure in the outer chamber. Now what this does is if the fork is fully extended and you release this bleeder valve, the PSI in the outer chamber of the fork will go to 0. This is really important because any kind of temperature change, whether it be from operation or just the conditions around you, can cause pressure buildup in the outer chamber. The easiest way to think of this is if the pressure in this chamber is only built up to 1 or 2 PSI, that may not seem like much, but as the fork is compressed through the stroke, the volume in which this pressure is in shrinks, so the pressure builds. This will actually create more damping force through the stroke. So when some people feel like their forks are getting harsh throughout a moto or later in a day, it's because the heat has built up enough that the pressure has risen in the fork. So between motos, it's always really good to just take a quick second to bleed these forks to release the pressure and keep your fork working consistently. So now let's talk about the other end of the stroke, the rebound. This seems to be one that people get a little more confused by and seem to play with less. The rebound is very simple. So as we said, this is the compression of the stroke. The rebound is when the fork extends. So how does the adjuster work in this case? If you turn the adjuster clockwise, tightening it, it will restrict the oil flow, meaning the fork will extend slower. It will rebound slower. If you go counterclockwise and open that adjuster, it will allow more oil flow on rebound. The fork will extend or rebound quicker. So this one's also a little bit different for people to understand and something you really have to still play with to learn. I implore the same as compression to try large changes to figure it out. Same thing, when I say 10 clicks, I'm talking about going all the way clockwise until the rebound adjuster bottoms out, and then 10 clicks is the counterclockwise motion from fully bottomed out. If the fork rebounds too slowly, it will feel planted initially, but say as you hit a long section of braking bumps, the fork may begin to pack because as it hits each obstacle, the fork will compress and it will not rebound quick enough before hitting the next obstacle, meaning the force will keep driving the fork deeper and deeper into the stroke without recovering. After a while, the fork will get so deep into the stroke, you're using the later stroke travel or the damping there, and it will feel really stiff and harsh. So in this case, you would speed up your rebound, so between each obstacle, the fork can extend quicker to take on the next obstacle without getting so packed down. Now by reversal, if the rebound is too quick, it may have a springy feel. For every bump you hit, it might extend back too quick. And then when going into corners as you settle into the rut, the bike may be topped out because the fork extends with so much force, it doesn't want to settle. As I said, honestly, anybody can sit there and give you advice and tell you what clickers you should and shouldn't run, but everyone is different and everybody needs to learn how to do this for themselves if they want to properly set up their bike. So honestly, the best thing to do is keep very solid notes, because the worst thing that can happen is if you try a lot of different settings and it just flat out gets worse, just go back to your base setting. You always want to keep whatever your best or what you consider your base setting is written down. So if you make a mistake or an error, or you just flat out get confused on what made something do something different, go back to your base and start from scratch. So another thing to remember is that compression and rebound adjustments can slightly affect each other in the sense that, say you go softer on compression and you start to use more of the fork, you may need a little bit quicker rebound to get back that travel between obstacles. Vice versa, if you go stiffer on compression, you may need to slow down the rebound slightly so it'll settle more in the corners and not top back out as quickly. So honestly, the ifs and buts on when to make these decisions and what clickers to change can be quite a bit to take on. So today we've tried to keep it very simple and digestible by just focusing on the forks. In our next episode, we're going to dive into a shock, talk about those adjustments, what high and low speed is. So until then, check out vitalmx.com for more tech tips. And if you have any questions, anything we can help you with, throw them in the comments section below.